Nolan Smith Jr. was driving 135 miles per hour in a 70-mile-per-hour zone. That is not a typo. That is 65 miles per hour over the legal limit in the state of Georgia on May 15th. ESPN's Tim McManus confirmed it through 6ABC. And the moment that report dropped, the Philadelphia Eagles had a problem they did not see coming and cannot simply move past. The facts are straightforward. Nolan Smith Jr. was pulled over in Georgia and arrested on 2 charges: speeding, reckless driving. Law enforcement clocked him at 135 miles per hour in a zone posted at 70. That gap between those two numbers, 65 miles per hour over the limit, is not a lead foot moment or a brief lapse in judgment. That is a sustained, conscious choice to operate a vehicle at nearly twice the legal speed. Georgia takes reckless driving seriously. It is not a minor citation you pay and forget. Reckless driving in that state carries real legal weight. It can mean fines, license consequences, and depending on the circumstances around the stop, it opens doors to more serious outcomes in court. Smith is going to need legal representation. He is going to go through a process, and every step of that process plays out while he is supposed to be preparing for an NFL season. That is the part of this story that matters for Philadelphia. Not just what happened on a Georgia road on May 15, what happens in the weeks and months that follow. But before you understand why this hits Philadelphia so hard right now, you need to understand exactly who Nolan Smith Jr. is inside that Eagles building. Because the team's investment in him is the reason this arrest stings at a completely different level. The Eagles did not stumble into Nolan Smith Jr., they went and got him. Philadelphia selected Smith in the first round of the 2023 NFL Draft with the 30th overall pick. You do not spend a first-round pick on a player you are unsure about. You spend it on someone you believe can anchor part of your defense for years. Smith played his college ball at Georgia. He was one of the most explosive edge rushers in that program's recent history, playing alongside other high-level prospects in a defense that dominated college football. When the Eagles called his name in the first round, it was a signal. Philadelphia saw a young, fast, high-motor pass rusher who could develop into a legitimate weapon off the edge. The early years in the NFL are rarely smooth for edge rushers coming from college. The transition requires learning leverage, hand technique, counter moves, and how offensive linemen at this level take away what worked in college. Smith was working through that development curve. The Eagles showed patience. They kept faith in him as part of their defensive future. That faith is now sitting inside a complicated story. This is exactly the distraction the title is pointing at. Not just an arrest. A first-round investment. A young player the Eagles publicly committed to, now carrying legal charges into an offseason that Philadelphia needed to be clean and focused. The distraction is real because the stakes attached to Smith are real. Let's put 135 miles per hour into real terms. At that speed, a vehicle covers nearly 200 feet every single second. Reaction time at that velocity is essentially zero. A problem in the road, another car, an exit ramp, anything at all, and there is no time to respond. Law enforcement does not treat that kind of speed as aggressive driving. They treat it as a danger to every other person sharing that road. This is not a story about an athlete making a mistake at 80 miles per hour in a 65 zone. That happens. Athletes get speeding tickets. This is a different category. 135 miles per hour is a number that courts notice. It is a number that the NFL's personal conduct policy notices, and it is a number that the Eagles front office has to sit across from and figure out how to handle. The NFL's personal conduct policy does not require a criminal conviction to act. The league can investigate, fine, and suspend players for behavior it determines is detrimental to the game. An arrest for reckless driving at 135 miles per hour, confirmed by ESPN and reported widely, is the kind of conduct that puts a player on the league's radar immediately. Commissioner review is a real possibility. A suspension is a real possibility. And Smith is going to spend part of his offseason not focused on football, but focused on a legal process and whatever the league decides to do next. And here is where it gets harder for Philadelphia specifically, because the Eagles are not in a position to absorb this kind of distraction quietly. Not right now. Not after the offseason they just had. The Eagles have built one of the most respected rosters in the NFC. Jalen Hurts leads the offense. The defense has pieces that rival any unit in the conference. Philadelphia is not rebuilding. They are in their window. Every offseason decision, every roster move, every piece of news that comes out of that building matters because this team is trying to win right now. An arrest story on a first-round defensive pick does not just affect Nolan Smith Jr. It creates a conversation about discipline and leadership inside the locker room. It creates a press conference question that Howie Roseman and the coaching staff now have to answer. It creates a story that follows the Eagles into training camp if it is not resolved cleanly before then. Other teams in the division notice. Other players around the league notice. And fans in Philadelphia, a city that holds its team to a high standard and has no patience for off-field problems during a contention window, are going to want answers. The Eagles gave Smith their trust. They drafted him in the first round. They stayed patient through his development. That relationship is now being tested in public in a way that the franchise did not choose and cannot control. Go back to the title one more time. Eagles' star arrest just created a massive distraction, not ended a career, not destroyed a franchise, created a distraction. And in a league where off-season focus, practice reps, and clean preparation directly impact what happens in September and beyond, distractions cost teams more than people realize. Smith will go through the legal process in Georgia. His legal team will work the case. Depending on how the court handles the charges, outcomes range from fines and probation to more serious consequences. Georgia courts have handled high-profile reckless driving cases before, and the results are not always lenient simply because the defendant has money or fame. The NFL will conduct its own review under the personal conduct policy. That process moves on its own timeline and does not wait for the courts to finish. The league can act before any verdict. Smith could be looking at league-issued discipline before training camp even begins. The Eagles, for their part, are going to say the right things publicly. They will express concern. They will say they are gathering information. They will let the process play out. That is the standard response, and it is the correct one legally. But behind closed doors, that front office is having direct conversations about what this means for their roster planning, their depth at the position, and how much runway Smith still has inside their building. He is young. He is talented. This does not have to end his career in Philadelphia, but it does change the conversation around him. And it forces the Eagles to spend time and energy this offseason on a problem that should not exist. Every hour the coaching staff spends addressing this situation is an hour they are not spending on sinking preparation. Every press conference question about Smith's arrest is a question that does not get asked about the team's growth and development. That is what a distraction does. It pulls focus away from the work, and for a team with championship goals, pulled focus is expensive. So here is where this lands. An Eagles linebacker was arrested on May 15 in Georgia. He was doing 135 miles per hour in a 70-mile-per-hour zone. ESPN confirmed it. The charges are real, the legal process is real, and the impact on Philadelphia's offseason is real. Nolan Smith Jr. is a first-round pick with a future in this league if he handles what comes next the right way. But right now, in this moment, his decision on a Georgia road just handed the Eagles a story they did not want. This is exactly the massive distraction the title warned you about, and Philadelphia is going to be managing it all the way to training camp.